All right, let's dive right into this explainer, because today we are unpacking something absolutely wild. We're going to uncover a startling new framework for what actually happens to our deepest, unfinished obsessions when we die. We'll be pulling some fascinating insights from a source text called the Dusk Analyst, and honestly, it completely upends how we traditionally think about the afterlife, human consciousness, and the legacies we leave behind. And just to be clear right out of the gate, we are not talking about ghosts or supernatural realms here, not at all. Instead, we're looking at a highly structured, dynamic process where our most intense, unresolved drives might literally outlive our physical bodies.
Think about this for a second. Have you ever just had an obsession, like a calling or even a deep, intense grievance that you couldn't quite account for in your own lived experience? We've all felt these strange, unexplainable drives. Maybe you felt irresistibly drawn to a specific lifelong project, or perhaps you carry a political grievance that feels way larger than your own life. Well, what's really fascinating here is that the source material suggests this isn't just quirkiness, it's structural. It's not just a random personality trait. It might actually be the continuation of work that was started long, long before you were even born.
So let's get into section 1, the rebirth myth. To really grasp what is actually going on here, we first have to violently dismantle the popular romanticized myth of reincarnation that pretty much all of us are familiar with. See, the original founders of these contemplative traditions saw a very stark structural reality. But over the centuries, that got watered down into a comforting myth. We have to completely abandon what I'd call the cup and wine myth. You know the one. It's the idea of a soul acting like the wine, being poured from one bodily cup into another, bringing all its old memories and identity right along with it. The structural reality is much, much starker than that. There is no traveling soul. There is absolutely zero memory transfer. When the biological body fails, the I, the experiencer, who is reading, listening, and feeling right now, permanently ends. Period. The founders of these traditions recognized a reality without any surviving experiencer. So naturally, you're probably asking, if the I doesn't survive, what on earth does? That brings us right to section 2, vessels and the collective. If there's no soul packing its bags for a journey, we need to map out the actual landscape where this process of rebirth takes place. We need to define the environment. Our first core concept here is the collective. Now, you might immediately think of Carl Jung's collective unconscious, right? You picture this dusty, static library of ancient archetypes. But the source text makes a massive, absolute correction here. The collective is not a static archive at all. It is a living, turbulent ocean. Right now, as you're listening to this, your brain and body are processing millions of bits of sensory data and generating countless stray thoughts that your conscious mind never even uses. This metabolically expensive surplus doesn't just vanish into thin air. It's continuously poured into this dynamic ocean. Every single one of us is contributing to it, right this second. And let's talk about our own bodies, which the text refers to as our vessels. The vessel is just the biological hardware. It pulls in contents from that collective ocean, beliefs, emotions, cultural drives, and runs them. And out of this interaction, a temporary I is produced. It's kind of like a television set. As long as the TV is plugged in and running, there's a picture on the screen. But when the vessel fails, when the TV loses power, that specific picture, the I, completely ceases to exist. Take a second to really let that sink in. The broadcast doesn't magically float away to another TV in another living room. It simply stops. Okay, section 3, the unresolved configuration. So if the I dies with the vessel and our mental surplus just flows back into the collective ocean, what exactly is doing the returning when we talk about rebirth? Well, this brings us to a really cool concept called crystallization. For most of us, our daily thoughts, our fleeting beliefs, our minor worries, they're totally diffuse. When our vessel dies, those loose contents just scatter and dissolve right back into the collective ocean. That's the default fate for practically everybody. But if a person spends decades intensely focused on a single thing, say a lifelong project, a deep, fanatical devotion, or even a bitter, unrelieved argument, those contents literally welds together. They crystallize into a tight, highly coherent structure or pattern that is actually strong enough to survive intact in the collective, even after the original vessel is long gone. Let's trace this life cycle because it's fascinating. Imagine a brilliant composer. They spend 30 years developing a completely new style of symphony, but their vessel dies before it's finished. That pattern has crystallized, sure, but structurally, it's incomplete. It's an unresolved configuration. Because it lacks closure, it basically just waits in the collective ocean. It drifts in those currents until eventually it encounters a new, living vessel whose internal contents naturally resonate with that exact shape. And when the fit is right, boom, the pattern takes hold and the hosting deepens.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the candle flame analogy. To truly grasp how a calling transfers without a soul or a migrating identity, we've got to look at this elegant, ancient metaphor that nails the structural reality.
This brilliant observation comes from the early Buddhist monk Nagasena. When people asked him how rebirth could possibly happen without a traveling soul, he offered this incredibly precise image. He said, "A flame lit from another flame is neither the same flame nor a different one." I mean, wow. It perfectly captures how an unresolved configuration continues its forward momentum.
Let's break down exactly how this works in practice. The first candle burns down. That's the original vessel dying. But right before it goes out, it lights a second candle. The heat, the light, the causal continuity of that specific work, that is all passed on. But look really closely. Absolutely zero wax transfers from the first candle to the second. None. The second vessel continues the exact same work and heat of the first, but it is an entirely new piece of wax. It has its own genetics, its own environment, and absolutely zero memory of the first candle. The configuration continues, for sure, but the identity? Not a chance.
And finally, Section 5, your unexplained calling. Let's bring this grand metaphysical concept directly back down to you and your daily life. How does this actually feel from the inside?
From the inside, rebirth doesn't look like having some grand, mystical vision of your past life in ancient Egypt. It just looks like having a vocation. It looks like dedicating your life to finishing in architectural design or suddenly taking up a political grievance that you definitely didn't personally start. You might feel a strange, incongruent grief that doesn't match anything you've actually lived through. Why? Well, because you are the new resonant vessel for the collective's unfinished business. You are the new candle, burning with a heat that was passed to you from a configuration that the collective simply refused to let go of. So, the final provocative thought I want to leave you with in this explainer is this. When you look at your own deepest drives, your unexplainable passions, and your most stubborn obsessions, whose ancient, unresolved configuration is currently masquerading as your own personal ambition? What unfinished work of the collective is your vessel hosting right now? It's a lot to think about, isn't it?